We're back to a dreary day today, huh? All right, this is a follow-up for Louise because I didn't. I guessed that I might fail to answer her first question in dealing with the larger issue of silhouettes. So I'm going to respond to this. Can you speak specifically to the topic of the silhouette when composing and setting up a painting? So the topic of the silhouette when composing and setting up a painting. So I'm going to just walk you through briefly again the ideas associated with the silhouette. So there we are again with this discussion that Ang holds about looking at the Greeks and the Greek vases in particular. And here we are seeing that they are all about the silhouette, right? And the silhouette being a cutout, a simple cutout of a figure grouping in this case. And but silhouette can mean overlapping. A figure overlaps another figure, and sort of silhouettes against it. As my lighter part of my light hand against my dark hand, there, the silhouetting against each other. It goes on. The discussion goes on to talk about the use of silhouette, the simple cutout, heavy use of it in. Not unreminiscent, and the massive influence of Ang is always felt. So we're looking at the cutout, simply a cutout, the dark cutout, call it a silhouette if you like. That's my word for it. And if you're referring to what I said and referring to what Degas said when he repeated that, when he iterated his idea that it's all silhouettes. It's all silhouettes. What was he talking about? He's talking about picture making, inevitably, right? And so when you look at a picture, if you don't get the idea of the silhouette, you must be missing something important, right? So so I'm just repeating some of the same things. I'll get on with this in just a second. So the silhouette. You can see the silhouette, for example, of the jacket here against the shirt. There's a silhouette, right? Or you can say the same thing about the silhouette of the object against the book or whatever it is, against the dark background. These are classic, obvious silhouettes. And he has a tendency, Manet, in his tonalist mindset, to put down sort of blocked-in light shapes. He'll set them down as masses, etc. So. All right, so let's go back again and say, what's the significance of this in relation to design? And so when you're looking at the use of the silhouette in setting up a still life, the fundamental thing in setting up a still life, as I've mentioned in the previous ones, is the crucial thing is a creation of a center of interest. And interest is created primarily. It used to be that Corot said that it was created by light. Put a big blast of light right in the middle of a picture and you have a center of interest. And it really isn't far from being true. But it's, that'll wear itself out pretty fast. If you look at those paintings I showed, the Rembrandt one, Swanenberg, Rembrandt's teacher, and that blob of glowing light in the middle of a painting, it gets boring pretty fast if that's all you have, right? So why do you want a silhouette? Well, silhouette, first of all, it's the point of the highest contrast, such as this one right here with a cutout edge. And by the way, that now is exactly and all I mean by silhouette. I don't care about the niceness of saying it's something in front of something else. I don't care how it's produced. If it's sharp edged and high contrast, I think of it as silhouette. And I think that's the useful way to handle the term. And so in a center of interest, you would expect perhaps the lightest light, though I haven't found that to be absolute. But you actually will be finding the most pleasing colors, or among the most pleasing colors, you'll find the highest contrast with the sharpest edges, and frequently areas that are busy. Now, these hands are busier than the head, but I guess because of the complexity of form and all that, the head area begins to be more interesting. You could say it's more interesting because it's a human head. We're more interested in the head than the hands, but I think what keeps you here more than anything else, visually, purely and simple, is the silhouette right here. So in creating a still life, your center of interest wants to have that kind of a component. And if you just look at the thing as a whole, you will say, And does this total package of silhouettes up in this central area, does it dominate the other ones, right? So, or is it a nice distribution where this thing owns the center? And so you'd see that he's doing the same thing, Leighton. And so this is his, in this case, the dark is dark, but you will find these significant heightened silhouettes here, 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 in this central area. You see some of it over here, but you don't see them out in this corner out here. And there's nothing to do with being focusing or disfocusing or anything like that. It's being out of focus, rather. These aren't soft edges. They're all cut out. But the low contrast is what gives them their weakness, right? So it's weaker. Even though this is very light, it doesn't have the same pop as this thing here because of the sharpness of the edge plus the contrast simultaneously. So when you're designing, you're looking for, rather, just like in every other aspect of setting up a still life, you're looking for an orderliness and a domination, right? So you expect to have one spot dominate. That's called the center of interest. And you do whatever it takes to make sure it dominates. I mean, it's interesting that you'd say, well, isn't this blue sort of out of the blue? It's sort of sticking out over here. Well, there's enough blue. If you take the total package of the center, there's enough blue here to hold its own against that one. You would say the same thing about other aspects of it. Why isn't this busyness here dominating that? Well, truly, to some degree, it is in your face. It actually is interfering a little bit, in my view. But those are the kinds of orderlinesses you expect. You expect the center doesn't have to be dominating in every possible way, but it does expect. Let's say when the viewer walks by, if he doesn't get himself right here, then there's something wrong with your setup. So the silhouette does so much. Now, the one thing I didn't talk about was the beauty of the silhouette, the interest, the intrigue of it. Look how interesting the shape is. That is interesting to look at. Purely interesting, right? Just visually interesting. And you'd expect that when silhouettes are cut out, like this one, if you're going to cut them out, you should also make them interesting. Don't just bore me to death. Although it's okay if it'll get you some significant way toward the domination principle. All right, so now again, I'm going to look at, you're looking now at the highest contrast, brightest spots, right smack in the middle of the picture. Is almost like, like by the book, right? That's just the way it comes across, isn't it? And you can see the weight of the silhouette. Doesn't mean you can't have silhouettes all over the place. But this silhouette, this grouping right here is the most interesting total package. And that is, of course, the center of interest. And then what happens after you set up a center of interest with its domination like that, you just make sure that all the other guys are in some relation to it that doesn't exceed the power of this, right? One of the reasons to make a really strong center of interest is because then you can put anything you want around the picture and it won't be able to eat up your center. So power up a center is the way I express it. This is a powered up center. This is it, right? So you don't see anything out here or anywhere else, even though there's some interesting things happening in all the other areas. And you do want interesting things to happen in all the other areas. But this is the point of domination, and that's the role silhouette plays in it, okay? I'm not going to say hugely more, but I love the way Degas handles this. I mean, here it is, just, again, you might say by the book. This isn't the lightest light, by the way. That's the lightest light, right? Probably. But this is the dominant spot, and he does it with color plus edge. He also does with busynesses and other kinds of things. This is a very powerful center. It's got among the lightest lights, if not this one. It's got the busyness factor working for it. It's got the screaming chroma, the most brilliant chroma is right there, and it's got the highest contrast. But that again is the role that silhouette plays. Now you'd expect, by the way, if you're a designer, once you make a silhouette, you expect to see the silhouetted edge, wherever it shows up, to be rather interesting, right? As a set now, as I say, as a set. You're never in the music if you don't see those things as a set. So, and here he does it again. Now here's probably the lightest light in this picture is right here. The sharpest edges, all that sort of thing is happening here. And then there's a distribution of that interest, as you can see, in places like this. Each of these would be in the category of what I call a silhouette. And this probably is, without doubt, I'd say I don't think it's the most interesting by busyness, but it's the most interesting in terms of this number of things, the kind of things that it does, it seems to me. But if you take that and you immediately expand it to include all these guys here, which are elements of silhouetting elements that are all of a piece, and include this, and you realize that this thing here really is the package of the leading silhouettes, and of course the domination is right here. So it's great stuff, really delightful stuff. there isn't. I don't know. Jerome's a great designer, but he's nowhere near as musical as Degas. He's right. He's aesthetically pleasing. There's something about this kind of music, though, that I think it compels me to really look hard at him over and over. Gamble said once about Degas, he's always interesting. And I don't know if there's if a guy's worth looking at all, and he's always interesting, you've got a guy who's special, very seriously special. And when we're talking about interesting, though, we're talking about what makes pictures interesting, right? And I want you all out there who are totally dedicated to the idea of that well-drawn or well-designed in black and white is good enough to consider you're competing against this. Can you actually say that your brown picture is going to stand you in as good stead if you're sitting in the same room with a picture like this, or like that, right? Look at the delightful silhouettes over here. Really delightful stuff. And really, it's virtually no other silhouettes in this picture to speak of, right? Certainly no strong ones, and it becomes a diminishing. So there's a little bit of something here, and other little edges, specks here and there, but mostly that's the game right there. This is the dominant spot, and it's the silhouette doing all the work. Now that's what your still life needs, Louise. It needs to have a dominant spot like that, and where nothing else down anywhere else gets past it, and not by fuzzing your eyes and fuzzing the areas out, but by the visual order of all those elements that come into play that make an area interesting. So a center of interest, all those elements that make interesting are factors. So chroma is more interesting than no chroma. Sharpness of edge, contrast, shapiness, busyness, all those things make for centers. And that's when, then there's a distribution of those things that happens throughout a picture. All right, I'm going to skip over and go straight to Tarbell for lack of time. And I want to have you look at these again the same exact way. Do you see the domination? This is all we're talking about. This is silhouette, right? And this is silhouette here. And then these are lesser silhouettes, but they're still all silhouettes, much in the same sense as a Greek vase silhouettes, right? And so he's using the dominant silhouettes, and then he uses secondary levels of silhouettes, right? And that's our game. That's very much in the game once you're starting into the game of silhouette, which means cutout pattern, cut out mass meeting mass with a cutout. Some boring, some interesting. And then it is, again, a question of how much play and how relationally you've played these characters, right? These guys here, that's at the second level. But it's all being dominated by this one. This thing sets the tone for everybody else in the entire painting. That's the way design works. So that's the value of the silhouette here. The silhouette owns the place, it sets you all up. Everybody else knows who to be. At least all the shape guys and the silhouette players know who to be because of what that one's doing. All right. So you can see it again here, just the dominance of the points. Now this is, you'd simply wonder about this as is this the center of interest? Well, actually this is the center of interest. You don't want to get little about this kind of stuff. There's a dominant spot. Every center of interest has a dominant spot or the eye-catching moment in it, but this is the center of interest, this larger thing, where you see the best colors, the strongest contrasts in combination, in various ways. And then all these other guys, not artificially made this way, but are weaker. This isn't fakey stuff you do with drawing. This is actually the way you set it up. So these guys are intended not to be as strong as this guy in this design. Okay. You again see what he's doing here, the blast of light. Now this is more like a Corot, this Leighton, where the blast of light plus a couple little edges is everything, right? But you see the significance, the power of these silhouetting edges, the punch. So when we're talking about silhouette, that's what I mean by it. And I could be saying another word. I could be using the word light effects, right? Effects, light effects at edges, give this pop, gives this domination thing. So that's one of the reasons why Corot is significantly right. And he's talking about the dominance of light. But if you put an edge on a light, you get even more dominance of your light, don't you? You get even more punch. You get more eye draw, right? I don't know. That might be about it. You can see in designing this kind of a thing here as well that he's playing with you a bit. I mean, this is the area of dominant interest. How does that happen? Well, if it weren't for the strength of some of these silhouettes, plus the chroma, plus the busyness of the total package. Now, again, all this is arguable because you see if this is busy, but this is busy to the point of being, you can't look at it. Whereas this is just the right amount of busy where it holds your attention. You don't even look down here because this busyness has reached that point of being just one thing, one big smear, rather, in a sense. But but the dominance of this spot here, and then you grow bigger, you talk about the dominance of this light, which is produced by some of these silhouettes, and you begin to be talking about what creates a great center of interest, or the greater part that makes it a center of interest. It would be easy. You'd like to say that, why isn't this the center of interest? But it's easy to see that it isn't. And keep looking at pictures really big. Don't look for centers of interest. Just look at the thing really big and let your eye go where it will go, and you'll know what the center of interest is. Again, the silhouette and the way he's setting up here, but this has got nothing to do with it. I mean, you'd know that these are important in terms of placement, much like whatever you're dealing with here when you look through a viewfinder, shall we say. And you can see there's something that's very dominating about this, but we don't even see the rest of the, if this is a painting, it'd be one thing. This is a study for a larger painting. So I think that's going to cover it. There's an example of a still life here on the right. I've mentioned this before. And so it's actually one being set up, and you can see the distribution of these effects, the dominant one, and then the subplot, right? But this is, again, one of those things where you'd say this is really, there's a domination of this area slightly, but this whole thing is the spot. It's taken as a whole with a kind of a movement through it, but that's the spot. This thing is much more obviously, and again, if you're setting up a still life, this is your area of greatest interest, and then there's a diminishing distribution of spots of those things as you spot them around. By the way, spotting is a distribution of value units, but spotting with edge has its own value and its own special qualities. It's a combination of the spot plus the edge that creates even more. It creates its own game, I guess you'd have to say. So when you see this wrist here, and then you immediately see this, and then you see this, and you see this, you see those literally be at the point of edges. You don't see them as spots anymore, as blob spots. This one tends to be more of a blob, right? Or the head tends to be more of a blob. But when you're talking about the silhouette, you're talking about the capacity to create phenomena. Just where one value meets another value produces that. And so when I talk about these effects, and again, those are created by what I think of as a silhouette. Now, you could talk about silhouette as pure cutout again, like this is pure silhouette, that's pure silhouette. Silhouette is a very powerful player. Silhouette is used to establish the interest, right? The greatest interest of a shape. So if you have shapes out there and you're designing a still life and you don't silhouette them, you're wasting good shapes. I mean, so this would be a good example. If you didn't have anything else in this picture and the hand was the most interesting shape, what a waste. You put a dark hand in a dark hole, you can't see the shape. So you're losing the one great value of contrast, right? Contrast silhouette is to produce the beauty of the shape, to make a magical shape in a very useful spot. It's a delight, this funny stuff, and then this variation on that theme, isn't it? Even these other ones, every place he's silhouetting, all of a sudden he's playing that game that sort of started by this first impact curly cue thing. Very, 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 very gratifying. Yeah. All right, that's the end of that one. And so thank you very much for your question, Louise. If that's not adequate, that's the general nature of that discussion. But if you have something more specific, let's go for it, okay? So see you next time. Thank you. Do share, subscribe, and why can't I keep this in my brain? And make other further comments as you like. All right, see you soon.